It sounds a bit jargony to some people. Some people just understand it as reparations. There's a constituency out there, when they hear the words reparations, they say this will not advance the dialogue. What's the objective way of understanding and putting this?
First, we could just look at what has happened in the first half of 2022. The insurance companies have declared that there was more than 35 billion already spent, and very few assets are insured. So just imagine it's more like 200 trillion that have been probably over the 10 years spent because of climate impact. And again, we can take the example of Pakistan nowadays, what happened in Nigeria, in Chad, everywhere, India, even China has been suffering enormously. And of course, Europe, we have been destroying a lot of assets. So I think one measurement is, at least it gives a sort of indicator how much insured assets have been destroyed by climate impact, without counting too many other things that are not measurable so easily, the health consequences of heat waves or floods, human tragedies, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think the look for a particular number is really tricky. But the evidence that for a number of countries or communities, you cannot come back to the previous situation. It's too difficult and too costly. And even more, when you look at the indebted, even middle-income countries, or of course even worse for the low-income countries, when extreme weather have destroyed your infrastructure, your social networks and many things, and transport, and you have been indebted to fund that because that's necessary for development, and then if they are destroyed by the extreme weather events, and then you are still indebted to pay for something that has disappeared. And so I think we cannot now, it was a long conversation since Paris, you imagine, well, when we drafted the Paris Agreement, of course, this was a key hot question, but everything at that time was perceived as a legal liability. Who will be held accountable in front of a court? Which in reality is a badly framed question. It's about the reality of impacts, the solidarity we have to show on the immediate situation reaction, like emergency, but as well understanding that in some countries, some destruction cannot be repaired, so they have something else to be built. So I think the discussion was blocked, and it is unblocking, and I'm very happy of that because that's just a reality.
And you mentioned the Paris Agreement. You're a veteran, when it comes to...
That might be yes.
Yeah, but you're really instrumental in making the Paris Agreement happen. And these are voluntary commitments. Countries can renege on them. Yet over the past 6 years or so, we've seen progress on the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal, on the net zero commitments. We're now talking about rules on offsets trading. What is that thing that, you think we really got right in the Paris Agreement that we can use now as we start this loss and damage conversation?
So one thing is Paris Agreement could be done at a moment where, the big objective was having a global agreement with targets, embedding every country and not only one group or the other group, and to have really a vision of the long-term trajectory, the net zero. This was already very difficult to absorb for many countries. It was the first time. Even all countries agreed to make a climate plan and to have their national jurisdiction putting that in place, because it's about a balance between a top-down regime plus really something which is embedded in sovereignty of countries. Now where we are, we have now almost 6 years after, I think what is important is now everybody understand what they have signed off. It took time. The net zero, I think I can tell, most countries that sign up on the last minute of the last day of negotiations, they didn't understood exactly where we're signing for. And so for that, you need time to absorb, because everybody was focused on details where we were planning a sort of a big shock. And I think it took that time. So the first lesson the structure is solid. I will come with what we have to make as improvement now. But it was in 2015, which was super late, because they are long transformation. And if you take 5 years to understand what we have been signing up, you know, we are lagging behind all the time. So now and loss and damage was a perfect example. It was just like a cautious reference. We have to discuss about that. And then at this scope, we have to find a solution. Not one solution, certainly, but something much more concrete. But the recognition that it is not a problem between lawyers, but a problem between many humans together.
So what I hear you say is that, I mean, we've done a lot of work. We understand the processes. So what is coming now, like loss and damage, we should not take as much time discussing it.
No.
And like you say, this is, you know, when it comes to climate change, loss and damage shows the real bottom line. In Pakistan, more than 1,700 people died. The damage estimated billions of dollars, 30, I've seen some estimates of, 40. Nigeria, 600 people died. Early in South Africa, 400 people died. Kuwait, it's becoming difficult to live without air condition. This should not take as much time as the other processes took.
Absolutely, and I think that we are at the flipping moment for that. And I hope so, but I'm sure that. So now the problem is how we get the resources. It's not so much, everybody is responsible, but of course in priority is the one who have polluted most. So developed countries first, and now a number of emerging countries. And of course, so they have to contribute. But it's not only a national budget of governments. It's about now applying, in my view, the polluter pay principle more largely. And that's what Maya Motley, for example, is proposing, to create a 10% tax on the profit of the oil and gas companies, whether they are public or private. And you know, they have had, I don't know, the 37 billion of profit this year. So 10% of that, well, that will amount of, at least give some support. Then we see that there is a good momentum where we have been discussing new financial instruments from years. Capital, in a way, requirement, lending capacity of the World Bank, issuing of new emission of special drawing rights by the IMF, including in the debt, in a way, payments, the consequence of this global risk that climate change is. So we are discussing things that were totally taboos even 2 years ago. And it's not new ideas, they were there. We were discussing, I think, discussing this during the last 15 years. And you see now, because of the pressing of the threat, that we have to look at all these options, whether it is or there are international taxes, normally a taboo, a total taboo, but why not? Where's the money? There's somewhere, in particular when you look at the inequalities that have been growing during this COVID crisis here. And after that, we have to look at, yes, a financial system that is now evidently not fit for purpose. And sometimes we see loss and damage as a problem for poor communities in poor countries. And that's no more the case. It's everybody. And that is very fundamental. When you listen to insurers that are saying, maybe by 2025 or 2030, we'll not be able to insure those risks. How the global economy can function without insurance? Cannot. You cannot do any economic measurement or calculus or business model if you don't have insurance. So I think this beginning to be, in a way, integrated, that is not a problem for somebody else. It's a problem for all of us. That's why I think we can shake the system, which I think is necessary. And it was interesting to see President Macron bandwagoning with Maya Motley, which again, last year in Glasgow, her plan was seen, oh, that's too ambitious. And now is how we do that, how we do that even for the next spring meetings in Washington. So, you know, I think the shock is perceived, and so that's the first thing. I think after that, we need to create and reinforce the accountability of everyone within the Paris Agreement. And that now is a new step of governance, I think. Parliamentarians, subnational citizens should have much more say on what is really happening and telling the truth. You may have seen Antonio Guterres or listened to Antonio Guterres' speech yesterday on the accountability and the high-level group against greenwashing. We have to think about accountability because we have to restore trust that, yes, we are doing this all together and people are serious and they are delivering for real. And then the finance has to be in that mood of credibility. So I think we have to shake the system. Like, I'm very happy of the Paris Agreement. It's a good reference. I was very proud of what we achieved all together. But now we have to move to a second level because, again, we are lagging behind. Acceleration is not enough involved in the Paris Agreement itself. So we need to create more enforcement mechanism, in my view. At least oversight and accountability, in my view, are the key two words.
And this, because this is a very important topic, Maggie, I'm going to allow probably one question from the audience, if you have it. But before that, since you're a veteran, you've been at this for more than 2 decades, I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think we'll have as an outcome, at least from this COP and maybe the next COP, as far as loss and damage is concerned, from the perspective of the countries that are most affected?
I think they can win the points, even if a specific solution, for example, the creation of the facility for loss and damage, may not be an outcome we can get there, but the recognition that we have to have maybe one or several funds that can address emergency, for example, which is not the same nature of the funding than really trying to help the debt and indebted countries. So I think we will have a sort of categorization of the problem of loss and damage and the type of funding we should need for that. And then I do think we need that financial discussion where it has to take place, which is primarily into the international financial system, because UNFCCC cannot solve that. It has to be solved by the G20 first next week, and beyond that, at least. So I think it could give the problem, the clarity of the problem, and the necessity to really make progress this year, in particular with these 2 very important elements of the G20 and the spring and fall meetings, to come for the next COP with concrete achievement. And I think it's possible.
Yeah, okay. Meg, do we have a question? Oh, okay, we don't have a question. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic are you that COP is going to take loss and damage as seriously? Of course, they're going to take it seriously, but work it quickly, and we see tangible results.
The fact that we are talking about that. Of course, I look like the old timer would say, things are not the same. It was impossible to talk about that. In Paris, it was a super tense discussion, in particular because a number of developing countries, including US, were very worried about, it's a legal problem. We will be all accountable and responsible. The lawyers' approach of the United States, that's their culture. Even the Chinese were not particularly happy to be potentially held accountable on the past emission, and already the stock of Chinese emission is high. So it was just a taboo. That's why we get a network, we get first a dialogue and then a network. So very little. And now this is a main conversation. And I can tell that is a big sign. We need to continue pushing to find innovative solutions. It's complex, but now at least the problem is here and not just pushed back or under the carpet, which is what normally is the case before.
Okay, very quickly, we have a few seconds left. You lead, the European Climate Foundation. It's one of the biggest climate philanthropies in the world. I mean, how has philanthropy and climate change changed over the years as the conversation has changed, 1? And then 2, your organization supports many small groups, activists, to have their voices heard. We're here in Egypt. I've been at the main venue. You've been there. We've not seen protests. How do you feel about that?
So first, it's a very tense situation for me. On one side, we need to continue pressuring. COP are necessary, We need to really organize this sometime with accepting that many people commit to things they will not deliver, but we need to make the world aware. And in particular, that makes the leaders that are coming under pressure as well. So that's one. The philanthropy in general on climate has a rather simple view until now, which is where is this technological fix and how we can fix the mitigation very quickly. It's good, but it's very limited because the problem is much more complex. And adaptation and loss and damage are just beyond what their concepts are. That's why in Glasgow we decided to contribute to philanthropy to a small loss and damage fund just for the signal. On the activists we are supporting everywhere, I'm really concerned about, of course, in particular the political prisoner, that everybody calling for their liberation from Egypt. The activists are mostly repressed in many countries, and so we need to offer to these young people in particular, but not only young, the legal assistance they need, try to have the protection for them. So that is still coming from the philanthropy, but should be much more developed, because we need a vibrant civil society just to, again, hold the government, the different lobbies accountable. So I'm worried about this absence of life, which is you can sense in that COP.
And through, the thing that I'll take away is there's a need to shake up the system.
Yes.
All through.
Yes, and you know, very often people ask me, are you optimistic or pessimistic? And I say, we don't have a choice. We have to be activists in the very broad sense.
Laurence Tubiana, thank you very much.
Thank you.